Our sincerest apologies for starting this event late. It is a great pleasure to welcome you all to the validation of the Universal Periodic Review Midterm Assessment Report, which is as a follow-up to the Gambian'S Review that was held in 2019. The National Human Rights Commission is grateful and honored to welcome you all to such an auspicious event, which is central to our core mandates of ensuring the state's fulfillment of its national human rights obligation. The validation workshop is one of the highlights of the Commission's activities this year, and this would not have been a success without the relentless support of the committed committee members from government agencies, CSOs, NGOs, and other agencies. We would like to welcome you to this event, and as you can see in front of you in the program of events we have, it's a day-long event where we would engage with different stakeholders to look at the different themes that were addressed in the UPR. The UPR, as some of you might know, is one of the main monitoring mechanisms under the United Nations to ensure that states' efforts are in line with international standards or international best practices. Considering our history, our not so recognized human rights history in the past regime, the Gambia's UPR in 2019 had about 222 recommendations, out of which 207 were accepted and 15 were noted by the government, which in itself shows some commitment to government pioneering human rights. So the National Human Rights Commission, in its role to monitor the government's efforts, took up this role with key stakeholders to sort of do an assessment to see how far the government has gone, not just the state, but other relevant stakeholders in ensuring that these recommendations that were accepted are being adhered to. And in those efforts, we came out with this report, which entails different thematic areas, that is in terms of health, security reform, press freedom, and the list goes on. So in this validation workshop today, we will present this report, and further in the day, we work in things to ensure or to go through, to engage different stakeholders in addressing some of these issues. Without further ado, I'll call on the chairman of the National Human Rights Commission, Mr. Emmanuel Chu, to give the opening remarks of this event. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Ali Madiro, for those remarks. Good morning to all of you. Representative of the Minister of Justice, present, Yahya Cox. The representative of the Office of the UN Resident Coordinator, Yvonne Masaro, present. Our friend and colleague, the President of the Gambia Bar Association, a very valued partner. Our NGOs and CSO partners. I see the usual suspects, the waves. Priscilla, we're happy to have you here. All the CSOs members present. The committee members who have been meeting, collaborating and spearheading the development of this midterm assessment report. The representative of various government institutions present here, members of the press, Vice Chairperson of the Human Rights Commission, and commissioners present, and staff of the National Human Rights Commission. I greet you all, and I welcome you to the validation of the Universal Periodic Review Midterm Assessment Report. But perhaps I should start by commending the government of the Gambia, through the Minister of Justice, for the foresight in submitting the 2019 UPR report to the Human Rights Council and for accepting most of the recommendations touching on critical areas of governance and human rights. As was said by Commissioner 𝒂𝒂𝒏, the UPR is indeed a unique process involving a periodic review of the human rights records of 193 UN member states, and it gives states the opportunity to discuss measures adopted to improve the human rights situation in their countries and to overcome challenges to the enjoyment of those rights. As you know, and the Gambia was reviewed during the 34th session in Geneva, November 2019. The Gambia was reviewed on the 5th of November 2019. Incidentally, I was present. We were just established, and National Human Rights Commission was present together with another civil society organization that we went along. The Child Protection Alliance was also there. And following the presentation of the Gambian's report by the then Attorney General and Minister of Justice, 𝒂𝒄𝒄𝒏, the said report, the Gambian's report, was adopted by the working group on the 8th of November 2019. Prior to us being reviewed in 2019, we were reviewed, I think, in 2014, and there were recommendations that the Gambia had to do. And the report that was submitted in 2019 containing those submitted I'm not touching anything. I'm not even speaking, I'm making noise. Yeah. So that report actually gave the working group impressions of what Gambia was like. And remember, this was 2019. You can all imagine where we're coming from. So the Gambia government really submitted a very comprehensive report. And the working group in Geneva were very happy that from the period of 2016 to 2019, Gambia had made great strides. And they, however, during that period, expressed concern on some of the protection of the rights relating to minorities and existing discriminatory laws that are not in line with international standards. However, the Minister of Justice was able to explain to the working group that the Gambia, from 2017 to 2019, had made great strides. It had ratified several human rights treaties during that period. If you remember the second protocol on civil international covenant on civil and political rights, in which the Gambia ratified, talking about the abolishing the death penalty was one of them. We had, I think, ratified the Torture Convention. We were in the process of, I think at the time, we had ratified the Convention Against Enforced Disappearance, among many other things. The commission also, the government also explained to the working group at the time that the Gambia had been in the reform process, and that it had set up the Constitutional Review Commission, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Reparation Commission, the Security Sector Reform had already started, and of course the creation of the National Human Rights Commission. So it was, I guess, a very, very, very interesting interaction between the government of the Gambia and also the working group. And they commended the Gambia for the strides that it has made. But fast forward that the working group came up with 220 recommendations. Of course, some of those recommendations were almost the same, but during this process, states would actually tell the Gambia government, well, we need you to change A, X, Y, Z. We've looked at your laws relating to press freedom. We've looked at your law relating to gender-based violence, women's rights. So these exchanges were made, and 222 recommendations were issued at the time. The Gambian government accepted 207 and noted 15. And this is important. It's also important for us to give context to this whole thing, that the Gambian government has accepted that out of those recommendations, 222, they had accepted to make sure that they will implement 207, and they noted 15. By noting, the Gambian government was telling the working group that, well, we've heard you, we will look at it, but we are not ready right now to implement these recommendations. And you can guess what those were. Issues relating to LGBTQ+, there were certain provisions relating to women's rights. We know our laws talk about personal law, especially if you're a Muslim, those kind of things. But it was quite commendable that the government of the Gambia agreed that 207 of those recommendations we will, and this is why, I think this is important to know, to mention this, because I think this is what the committee that has been set up was meant to do, popularize those recommendations, and to also involve the various stakeholders to assist this government. We will be reviewed very soon again, so that the Gambian government will be in a position to say, yes, out of those 207 recommendations, we have done X, Y, and Z. So, ladies and gentlemen, the work of your committee and the activities undertaken, which brought us here today, to validate the Universal Periodic Review Midterm Assessment, ensures that the country's review in 2019 does not remain a mere process between the UPR group and the government of the Gambia, but rather that the various stakeholders, and importantly also the public as a whole, we are the beneficiaries, the public is the beneficiaries, that they know what those recommendations are, that they are involved in the process. So it is very important that people know if recommendations are made and the government has accepted, the beneficiaries must know what these recommendations are and what the government has done or has not done and what challenges the government face. And I think this is the important work that this committee has been doing. Your work and report ensures that the Gambian public is made aware of the dialogue that was undertaken by the government in Geneva, and what those recommendations are, and what they have agreed to implement. Your activities, I'm talking here about this committee, have raised awareness in the communities. You were last week, I think, in Carnegie areas. You've been in the Upper River region. It actually brings awareness as to what we're talking about, what these human rights issues are all about. The activities also raise public, as I said, awareness of the work of the NHRC. It's important that as an institution, we have been set up to promote and protect human rights. And it's therefore important that an institution set up like the National Human Rights Commission will be involved in the work of the UPR. To also assist the government, we also have an advisory role, so that the government knows their obligation and they will raise and they will implement the recommendations that have been set. And to that I say a big thank you to the committee and job well done for this document that you have produced. I would at this stage also express our gratitude to the Swiss Embassy in Dakar, Senegal, for supporting the committee, the work that we have been doing, the monitoring of the implementation, the preparation of the report. The Swiss Embassy in Dakar has been very instrumental, and they provided us with support. The National Human Rights Commission would also like to extend our profound gratitude and appreciation to the ministries, various ministries, institutions, for their support and partnership with civil society organizations in the development of this report. I think I will have to mention some of these key institutions which will play a pivotal role in this process by providing insightful information on different aspects of the recommendation. And the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Welfare, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Basic and Social and Secondary Education, Ministry of Justice, of course, and Child Protection Alliance, who incidentally were also in Geneva in 2019 when we were being reviewed. Article 19. And other institutions that have played a very important part. So again, thank you very much for coming. I wish you full deliberation. And again, I thank you all for your efforts participating in this event. And let us make sure that we continue flying the flag of the Gambia. Human rights is everybody's business, and it is our business. All of us. And the National Human Rights Commission is an institution you can always count on to spearhead this process of promoting and protecting human rights. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I think that was a good one. It's really laid out why we're here today. As he said, we're looking forward to fruitful deliberations. I'll now call on the representative of the UN Resident Coordinator Office, 𝒂𝒄𝒄𝒏, who is the Senior Human Rights Advisor in the UN Resident Coordinator's Office. Ms. Yvonne, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Chairman Chu, Commissioners, and staff of the National Human Rights Commission, the representative of the Ministry of Justice, and all government dignitaries present, UN colleagues, members of the diplomatic community, CSOs, NGOs, members of the press, and all partners present, all protocols observed. Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand before you representing Ms. 𝒕𝒉𝒂𝒏𝒏, the UN Resident Coordinator, who unfortunately was unable to attend this validation as she is out of the country. However, she sends her profound appreciation for the opportunity to provide a statement on behalf of the UN. She also congratulates the National Human Rights Commission for achieving such a critical milestone. Earlier on, Commissioner Halima correctly described the UPR. It is a review of human rights records of all UN member states, and it's a state-driven process under the auspices of the Human Rights Council. And it provides the opportunity for each state to declare what actions they have taken to improve the human rights situation in their country and to fulfill their human rights obligations. The ultimate aim of this mechanism is to improve the human rights situation in all countries and address human rights violations wherever they occur. The chair earlier in his speech gave us an excellent overview of the situation of the UPR in the Gambia and the recommendations that were given, the numbers that were accepted and noted, and the situation as it currently stands. But in addition to this, in 2020, the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, released the call to action. This is a transformative vision for human rights, and this call underpins the work of the entire UN system and reaffirms the UN's commitment to the principles couched in the UN Charter and the Universal Declaration for Human Rights. The Secretary General's call to action also refers to the UPR mechanism in advancing the SDGs with human rights at their core. The UPR is therefore a very important tool for the Gambia to ensure adequate review of human rights commitments as well as continued development. Ladies and gentlemen, the UPR touches on many areas that the UN in the Gambia works on, including but not limited to the rights and protection of women, children, migrants, and persons with disabilities. Therefore, the entire UN in the Gambia stands firm in supporting the state in the implementation of the recommendations, as well as supporting the National Human Rights Commission and CSOs in the monitoring of the implementation of the recommendations. As the UN in the Gambia, we are proud to have been part of the process from the onset, including in supporting the National Human Rights Commission and the CSO to attend the process in 2019. This was through the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, and UN Development Fund, UNDP, Joint Transitional Justice and Human Rights Program. I hope everybody can hear me. This doesn't seem to be working. To the state, I applaud and congratulate the various steps taken thus far to ensure the UPR recommendations are implemented, including, for example, the passing of the Disability Act aimed at realizing the rights of persons with disabilities. I encourage the continued implementation of outstanding recommendations, including passing of additional relevant legislation aimed at the promotion and protection of rights and submission of outstanding reports to treaty bodies. The UN stands firm in providing you support. To the National Human Rights Commission, I commend your continued trajectory in monitoring the implementation of the recommendations and assure the UN's continued support. I also commend your participatory approach in doing so, particularly by constituting a broad-based UPR committee drawn from government and non-governmental institutions to monitor and report on the status of implementation. I commend all the partners present for your attendance, your participation, and various support and collaboration you render to the National Human Rights Commission. I once again congratulate the National Human Rights Commission for this milestone and wish you all successful validation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Yvonne for that statement, and thank you for your congratulatory message. We assure you that the National Human Rights Commission, in partnership with other stakeholders, stay committed to ensuring the protection and fulfillment of human rights obligations in the Gambia. At this point, I would like to call on Ms. 𝒂𝒄𝒄𝒏𝒏, who is going to deliver a statement on behalf of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice. Ms. 𝒂𝒄𝒄𝒏.
Bar Association, representative of the UN President Coordinator, members of the Diplomatic and Consular Board, members of the Ad Hoc Committee, members of civil society organizations, the press, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to extend the regrets of the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Justice, who unfortunately could not be here this morning. I will be delivering his statement on his behalf. I am honored to be invited to speak at this occasion of validation of the Universal Periodic Nature Assessment Report. From the outset, I would like to thank the National Human Rights Commission for taking the initiative to monitor and report on the implementation process of the 207 recommendations that were accepted by the Gambia during our last Universal Periodic Review held at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva in November 2009. I am cognizant of the Commission's dedication to promote and protect human rights in the Gambia, and the efforts it has made in not only ensuring that the Gambia government implements the accepted recommendations, but also the citizenry is made aware of the said 2019 UPR recommendations through popularization activities across the various regions of the country. Having perused the draft report, it was apparent to me how painstakingly we have prepared this document. I found the report concise and informative, depicting our government's progress as well as its challenges in the implementation process. My ministry has taken note of the justice, rule of law, and legal reform issues highlighted in the draft report, particularly on outstanding ratifications of some treaties and state reports. I assure you that a fully functional human rights unit is in the offing at the ministry, and in due course we will improve in these scorecards. We remain committed to improving the country's legal and institutional framework to align it with international human rights standards. I also noted the Commission's budgetary constraints, which understandably pose some challenges to the implementation of your mandate. While I must say that this is not the desire of the government, I assure you that my ministry will continue to advocate for the Commission and government and support you in other resource mobilization endeavors whenever needed. On behalf of the government and the people of the Gambia, I wish to particularly thank the government and people of Switzerland for supporting this important activity through their embassy in Dakar. I would also like to thank all our other partners, the officials of various ministries, departments, agencies, and CSOs who were involved in the development of this report. I implore all of you to take this validation workshop very seriously and participate effectively to improve on this important report. You can be proud that the cumulative effect of all of these small steps that we are taking together is going a long way in paving the way for our country in regaining and even surpassing her lost glory and moral standing among her peers in the international community. As I conclude by wishing you a fruitful deliberation, I would like to thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you, Yaka, for delivering that on behalf of the Honorable Minister. I would now kindly request everyone if you could kindly go outside for a group photo, please.